The flashbulbs were blinding. Nora Chen glided down the red carpet, her emerald gown catching the light in ways that made the photographers gasp and call her name with increasing urgency. Each camera flash illuminated her high cheekbones, her perfectly symmetrical face, her enigmatic smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Ms. Chen." "Over here! Nora! This way! Give us the smile that broke the internet." She paused, turned, and offered the assembled press what they wanted. A practiced tilt of her head, the slight curve of her lips that had launched 1,000 magazine covers. The photographers went wild, their cameras clicking in frantic unison. To her left, a reporter thrust a microphone forward. "Nora, you're the face of Lumiere's global campaign now, the biggest beauty contract in history. How does it feel to be officially recognized as the most desired woman in America?" The question hung in the air. Behind her immaculate makeup, behind the facade of confidence and poise, Nora felt the familiar hollowness creeping in. The lights suddenly seemed too bright, the noise too overwhelming. Her mind flashed to another night, 5 years earlier, when the only man she had ever loved looked into her eyes and told her he was leaving because he couldn't bear to look at her face anymore. "It feels," she finally said, her voice a perfect blend of humility and triumph, like vindication. As she continued down the carpet, her publicist whispered in her ear, "He's here." Nora's step faltered almost imperceptibly. She didn't need to ask who he was. Daniel, her ex-husband. The man who had broken her in ways no one would ever fully understand. The man who had once told her she was too ugly to love. Now, after 5 long years, they would be in the same room again. He would see what she had become, what she had made of herself after he'd thrown her away. A cold smile formed on her lips, not the one she used for cameras, but something far more dangerous. Tonight wasn't just another industry event. Tonight was the beginning of her real triumph. 5 years earlier. "You can't be serious." Nora's voice was barely a whisper in the sterile conference room of the law office. The divorce papers lay between them, stark white against the polished mahogany table. Daniel Ellis sat across from her, his expression a mixture of impatience and pity. His attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit, kept her eyes on her tablet, pretending not to listen. "I've made my decision, Nora." Daniel's voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of a stranger, not the man who had promised to love her forever just 3 years before. "This isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time." Nora's hands trembled as she pressed them flat against the table. "Then we work on it. We go to counseling. We fight for our marriage. That's what people who love each other do." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. At 32, he looked like he belonged on a billboard. Classically handsome, with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. When they'd met at Columbia University 6 years earlier, Nora couldn't believe someone like him had noticed her. Plain, awkward Nora with her uneven features and the burn scar that traced her left jawline. "Love isn't the issue," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Then what is?" She leaned forward, desperation rising in her throat. "Just tell me. Whatever it is, we can fix it." Daniel exchanged a glance with his attorney, who gave a slight nod and stood. "I'll give you 2 a moment," she said, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Just say it," Nora finally whispered. Daniel looked up then, his blue eyes finally meeting hers. "I'm tired of pretending, Nora. I'm tired of forcing myself to look at you every day and act like I'm not repulsed." The word hit her like a physical blow. "What?" she breathed. "Your face." He gestured vaguely toward her. "The scar, yes, but it's everything. I thought I could look past it. I convinced myself it didn't matter. But I'm not attracted to you. I never really was." Nora felt as if she were floating above the scene, watching it happen to someone else. This couldn't be real. The man she'd cooked for, laughed with, made love with. The man who had held her through the night terrors that still came sometimes, remnants of the childhood accident that had left her scarred. He couldn't be saying these words. "You married me," she said, her voice hollow. "I married your mind. Your kindness." He shrugged, a quick dismissive movement. "I thought that would be enough." A sudden, horrible thought occurred to her. "Is there someone else?" Daniel didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "Who is she?" Nora asked, although some part of her didn't want to know. "Alessandra Mills?" He said the name like a confession. "From the agency, Alessandra." The model. The woman whose perfect face appeared on beauty campaigns and magazine covers. The woman who looked nothing like Nora. How long? 6 months? He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. But that's not why this is happening. It's a symptom, not the cause. Nora stared at the man she'd built her life around, seeing him clearly for the first time. "You're leaving me because of how I look. Because I'm not beautiful enough for you. I'm leaving because I deserve to be with someone I actually desire." His voice hardened. "And honestly, you deserve that too. Someone who doesn't have to fake attraction. Isn't that better than a lifetime of lies?" The tears wouldn't come. She felt numb, encased in ice. 6 years together, and this is what it comes down to. "My face doesn't please you enough." Daniel stood, buttoning his suit jacket with manicured fingers. "The settlement is more than fair. You'll get the condo in Queens, and the alimony will cover your expenses while you find your footing. My lawyer will—" "I don't want your money." The words came out sharp, surprising both of them. "Don't be dramatic. Nora, I need you to look me in the eye and say it again," she interrupted, standing too. Though she was nearly a foot shorter, something in her posture made him take a step back. "Tell me I'm too ugly for you to love." "Say the words," he faltered, then squared his shoulders. "Fine. You want the brutal truth? You're too ugly for me to stay. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But every morning I wake up next to you, I feel disappointed, trapped. Is that clear enough?" The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Nora picked up the pen, signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, and walked out without looking back. She made it to her car before the first sob tore from her throat. The weeks that followed passed in a fog. Nora moved mechanically through her days, teaching her literature classes at the community college by rote, then returning to the condo that no longer felt like home. The divorce was finalized with brutal efficiency. Daniel's money and connections ensured that. The settlement check arrived in her account, a sum that felt like blood money, payment for the years she'd wasted loving someone who found her repulsive. She didn't touch it. Instead, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, Nora stood in front of the bathroom mirror, really looking at herself for the first time since Daniel's revelation. The scar along her jaw was pale silver now, a souvenir from the car accident that had killed her parents when she was 8. Her eyes were too wide set, her nose slightly crooked from being broken in the same accident. Her lips were thin, her complexion uneven. Was she truly ugly? Or had Daniel's words rewritten her perception of herself? She thought of Alessandra Mills with her perfect symmetry and flawless skin, the type of beauty that opened doors, that made people stare, that men like Daniel coveted. A different kind of fire began to burn inside her, not the desperate grief that had consumed her since the divorce, but something sharper, more dangerous. If beauty was power in this world, then she had been powerless too long. Nora reached for her phone and called the number her friend Zara had given her weeks ago, the number she'd been too proud to use until now. "Dr. Winter's office," a pleasant voice answered. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," Nora said, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "For cosmetic procedures, of course. May I ask what specifically you're interested in?" Nora looked at her reflection again. "Everything," she said. "I want to change everything." Dr. Eleanor Winters was not what Nora expected. In her 60s, with silver hair cropped short and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "So," she said, After Nora had changed into the clinic's soft robe and settled into the consultation chair. "Tell me what brings you here." The rehearsed speech Nora had prepared suddenly felt hollow. "I want to be beautiful," she said simply. Dr. Winters studied her face without speaking, her expression professional but not cold. "Beauty is subjective, Ms. Chen. What does it mean to you?" The question caught Nora off guard. "It means power, desirability, not being looked at with disgust." Something flickered in the doctor's eyes, not pity, but recognition. "Someone made you feel undesirable." It wasn't a question, but Nora answered anyway. "My husband. Ex-husband now. He left me because I was too ugly for him." The words still burned her throat like acid. Dr. Winters set down her tablet and leaned forward. "I've been in this field for 30 years, Ms. Chen. I've transformed celebrities, politicians, people who become unrecognizable even to their families. I can give you what you're asking for. Symmetry, proportion, the features that society has deemed conventionally beautiful." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But I should warn you, it won't heal what's broken inside. If you're doing this for revenge, or because you believe beauty will bring you love, you may find yourself disappointed." "I'm not looking for love," Nora said, surprised by the hardness in her own voice. "I'm looking for a weapon." Instead of being shocked, Dr. Winters smiled slightly. "Now that I can help with." She picked up her tablet again. "Let's begin." The transformation wasn't quick or easy. It began with the scar, a series of laser treatments and dermal fillers to smooth the skin Daniel had called repulsive. Then came the surgeries, rhinoplasty to straighten her nose, a subtle eye lift to correct the asymmetry, cheek implants for definition, lip augmentation for fullness. Between procedures, as her body healed, Nora used part of Daniel's settlement money to hire Julian, a personal trainer who pushed her beyond what she thought possible. Her soft body hardened, curves emerging in the right places, strength building in muscles she hadn't known existed. She changed her diet, her skincare regimen, her hair. She studied how to apply makeup that enhanced her new features, how to dress for her transformed body. She walked differently, spoke differently, learned to command attention rather than shrink from it. The physical pain was excruciating at times, but it was nothing compared to the pain Daniel had inflicted with his words. Each discomfort felt like penance, like shedding an old skin she no longer needed. 16 months after signing the divorce papers, Nora Chen looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back was objectively beautiful. High cheekbones, perfect symmetry, clear skin, and a body that turned heads. But something was missing. The outside was transformed, but inside, she still felt like the woman Daniel had discarded. That night, she called Zara, the only friend who had stuck by her through everything. "I've spent a fortune becoming someone else," she said when Zara answered, "but I still feel like me." "Maybe that's because beauty isn't just about how you look," Zara replied. "It's about how you move through the world, how you make others feel in your presence." "What do you mean?" "Remember Vivian Blackwood from college? She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but men were obsessed with her. She had that quality, that magnetism. She knew her worth and made everyone else recognize it too." Nora thought about it. "How do I get that?" "You already have it," Zara said. "You just need to believe it." The next day, Nora enrolled in acting classes, not because she wanted to be an actress, but because she wanted to learn how to command a room, how to project confidence even when she felt hollow inside. Her teacher, Marcus, a former Broadway performer with keen eyes and brutal honesty, saw through her immediately. "You're not here to act," he said after her first session. "You're here to become." "Is there a difference?" she asked. "Acting is pretending. Becoming is transformation." He studied her. "What are you trying to transform into?" Nora thought of Daniel, of Alessandra, of the power they wielded so casually. Someone who can't be hurt. Marcus shook his head. "That person doesn't exist." "Try again." "Someone who can hurt back then." He smiled slowly. "Now that, we can work with." 2 years after the divorce, the first modeling offer came. Nora had been having lunch at an upscale restaurant when a woman approached her table, introducing herself as a scout for elite modeling agency. "You have an extraordinary look," the woman said, handing Nora her card. "Unique but commercially viable. Have you ever considered modeling?" Nora nearly laughed. The irony was almost too perfect, being approached for the same career as Alessandra, the woman Daniel had left her for. But opportunity had knocked, and Nora was ready to answer. The world of high fashion was cutthroat and demanding, but Nora approached it with the same methodical determination that had fueled her transformation. She studied the industry, learned its unwritten rules, cultivated relationships with photographers and designers who could advance her career. At 31, she was older than most new models, but her unique look, exotic yet familiar, striking yet approachable, filled a niche that designers were eager to exploit. Her background in literature gave her an intellectual edge that separated her from competitors. She could discuss Proust with a French designer or debate economic theory with a business executive at a post-show party. Bookings began to come in steadily, then rapidly. A cosmetics campaign led to a spread in Vogue, which led to runway shows for mid-tier designers, then top-tier. Her face began appearing on billboards, in television commercials. Across social media, people were fascinated by her, this mysterious beauty who had seemingly emerged from nowhere, who rarely gave interviews and never discussed her past. The public created their own narratives about her, spinning romantic tales of discovery and reinvention that were far kinder than the truth. Through it all, Nora remained focused on a single goal. It wasn't fame or fortune that drove her, though both came in increasing measure. It was the knowledge that one day, inevitably, she would cross paths with Daniel again. And when that day came, she wanted to be unrecognizable to the man who had found her too repulsive to love. She wanted to be the most desired woman he'd ever seen. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 4 years after the divorce, at the height of her new career, Nora received an invitation to speak at Columbia University's business school about personal branding and the business of beauty. The irony wasn't lost on her, returning to the campus where she'd met Daniel as a completely different person. The lecture hall was packed. Students and faculty crowded in to hear from the enigmatic model who had become the face of a dozen luxury brands. Nora moved through her presentation with practiced ease, discussing the intersection of beauty, business, and power with an authority born of bitter experience. During the Q&A session, a hand raised in the back of the room. Nora gestured for the microphone to be passed back, and when the person stood, her carefully constructed composure nearly cracked. Daniel. He looked the same, yet somehow smaller than she remembered. His hair was still perfect, his suit still expensive, but there were new lines around his eyes, a slight softening at his jaw. "Ms. Chen," he said, his voice betraying no recognition. "You've spoken eloquently about the value of authentic personal branding. Yet there's very little information about your background available to the public. Don't you think that lack of transparency undermines your message?" The room went quiet, students sensing the sudden tension. Nora allowed herself a small smile. "On the contrary," she said smoothly, "I believe we all have the right to reinvent ourselves, to shed past identities that no longer serve us. Some chapters of our stories are meant to be private, not because we're ashamed of them, but because they belong to a person we no longer are." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Ellis?" he supplied. Daniel Ellis. Mr. Ellis. She rolled his name across her tongue like a sour candy. "Have you never wanted to erase a mistake from your past? To become someone new?" A flicker of unease crossed his face. "I believe in taking responsibility for one's actions, not erasing them." How admirable. Her voice was honey laced with venom. "I'll have to remember that perspective." She moved on to the next question, dismissing him as casually as he had once dismissed her. But her heart was thundering in her chest. He hadn't recognized her. The man who had shared her bed for 3 years, who had known every inch of her body, hadn't seen the woman beneath the new face. After the lecture, as she gathered her materials, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. That was quite a performance. She looked up to find Daniel leaning against the frame, arms crossed. The room had emptied, leaving them alone. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," she replied coolly, "though I'm surprised you stayed." "You don't strike me as someone particularly interested in the beauty industry." He stepped into the room. "I'm more interested in you, Ms. Chen. There's something familiar about you that I can't quite place." A cold thrill ran through her. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The recognition, the shock, the regret that would surely follow. But as she studied his face, she saw only confusion and attraction. He was looking at her the way men always looked at her now, with desire, with appreciation, with that hunger that had been missing from his eyes in the final months of their marriage. "Perhaps we've met before," she said, gathering her courage. "At a party, maybe. Or in another life." He moved closer, confidence radiating from him. "I'd remember meeting you. Would you?" She tilted her head. "I've found that men often see what they want to see, and forget what they choose to forget." His brow furrowed slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" It would be so easy to tell him now, to watch recognition dawn in his eyes, to see him stammer apologies or justifications. She had fantasized about this moment for years, rehearsed cutting remarks and devastating revelations. But looking at him now, she realized something unexpected. He didn't matter anymore. This man who had once been the center of her world, whose opinion had shattered her sense of self, he was just a man. Flawed, ordinary, far less significant than the specter she'd built in her mind. "It means," she said, closing her portfolio with a snap, "that memory is selective. We remember what serves us and discard the rest." She shouldered her bag. "Goodbye, Mr. Ellis. I doubt our paths will cross again." She walked past him, her expensive perfume lingering in the air between them. At the door, something made her turn back. "Oh, and Daniel. You might want to call Alessandra. I saw her at Milan Fashion Week last month. She mentioned things weren't going well between you two." His shock was palpable. "How do you—" But Nora was already gone, her heels clicking down the hallway, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She had imagined this encounter as the climax of her transformation, the moment that would bring her closure. Instead, it felt like a footnote, a paragraph in a story that had grown far beyond its origins. Daniel hadn't recognized her. But for the first time since he'd walked out, Nora realized she no longer recognized herself either. She had become someone new, not just on the outside, but somewhere deeper, in places surgery couldn't touch. The question was, did she like who she had become? The call from Lumiere came a month later. The French beauty conglomerate wanted her as the face of their global campaign, a 5-year contract worth 8 figures, the largest in the company's history. Her face would appear on billboards in Times Square, on the Champs-Élysées, in Tokyo and Dubai and São Paulo. She would become, quite literally, the most recognized beauty in the world. The irony was almost too perfect to bear. Nora sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the contract spread before her on the glass coffee table. This should have been the ultimate vindication, the final proof that she had transcended her past, that she had turned Daniel's cruelty into triumph, yet she felt nothing but hollowness. The phone rang, breaking her reverie. It was Zara. "Have you signed it yet?" her friend asked without preamble. "Not yet. What's holding you back? This is everything you've been working toward." Nora stared out at the park, at the tiny figures moving below like ants. "Is it? I'm not sure I even know what I'm working toward anymore." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You know," Zara said carefully, "revenge is a powerful motivator, but it's a terrible destination." "This isn't about revenge," Nora protested, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. "Isn't it? You've spent 5 years and millions of dollars becoming the antithesis of the woman Daniel rejected. You've sculpted yourself into a weapon aimed at a man who probably hasn't thought about you in years." The words stung because they contained truth. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," Zara conceded. "But tell me this. If Daniel had never said those things to you, if he'd been kind in the divorce, would you still have done all this? Nora had no answer. The question you need to ask yourself, Zara continued gently, is who you're doing this for now. Are you still trying to prove something to Daniel, or is this finally about what you want? After they hung up, Nora stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows for a long time, watching darkness fall over the city. Below, lights flickered on, each one representing a life, a story, a person who knew nothing of her private war with the past. For 5 years, every decision she'd made had been colored by Daniel's rejection. Every surgery, every career move, every carefully cultivated relationship. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, becoming the embodiment of the beauty standard that had cost her her marriage. But who was Nora Chen without that driving force? Who was she when she wasn't defined by either Daniel's rejection or the world's newfound adoration? She didn't know, and that terrified her more than any surgery, more than any public appearance, more than the thought of seeing Daniel again. With sudden clarity, she realized she needed to find out. The annual Fashion Achievement Awards were held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, transforming the Temple of Denver into a glittering showcase of industry power and celebrity. It was here, on this night, that Lumiere planned to announce Nora as the new face of their brand, a strategic move designed to generate maximum publicity. As her car pulled up to the red carpet, Nora felt strangely calm. The panic and hollowness that had plagued her for weeks had given way to a quiet resolve. Tonight would change everything, but not in the way anyone expected. The emerald gown she wore had been designed specifically for this event, its color chosen to complement the Lumiere branding that would be unveiled at midnight. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in elegant waves that framed her perfect face. The face that had cost her everything and given her nothing of real value. The red carpet was chaos. Flashbulbs, shouted questions, the admiring murmurs of the crowd. Nora navigated it with practiced ease, pausing where her publicist directed, smiling on command, answering the repetitive questions with gracious patience. Nora. Over here. Ms. Chen? This way. Give us the smile that broke the internet. Inside the museum, the elite of the fashion world mingled, air-kissing and exchanging gossip beneath the ancient Egyptian temple. Nora made her way through the crowd, accepting congratulations for a contract that hadn't yet been officially announced. News traveled fast in this industry. Her publicist, Melissa, appeared at her elbow. "He's here," she whispered, confirming what Nora already knew. "With his new fiancée. Not Alessandra. They broke up last year. This one's younger. A model with his agency." Of course she was. Daniel's type hadn't changed. "Where?" Nora asked, scanning the room. "By the bar? Blue suit, light blue tie." Nora saw him immediately. He stood with his arm around a slender blonde who couldn't have been more than 25. He was laughing at something she said, his head thrown back in that familiar way that once made Nora's heart skip. Now she felt nothing but a detached curiosity. "The Lumiere executives want to speak with you before the announcement," Melissa continued, oblivious to Nora's internal dialogue. "They're in the VIP section. 15 minutes until showtime," Nora nodded. "I'll be there. I just need a moment." As Melissa disappeared into the crowd, Nora made her decision. She moved through the room with purpose, accepting compliments and well wishes without breaking stride. When she reached the bar, she positioned herself directly in Daniel's line of sight. It took him only seconds to notice her. She watched recognition flash across his face, not of her identity, but of her status. He knew exactly who she was now. Her face was inescapable in New York. Their eyes met across the crowded bar. She raised her champagne flute slightly, a silent acknowledgement. After a moment of hesitation, he excused himself from his fiancée and made his way toward her. "Ms. Chen," he said, his voice carrying the same confident charm she remembered. "We meet again." "I didn't realize you would be here tonight." "Mr. Ellis." She smiled, the practiced curve of lips that had launched 1,000 magazine covers. The fashion world is small. Intersections are inevitable. Indeed. He gestured to her glass. May I refresh your champagne? I'm fine, thank you. She studied him openly, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight gray at his temples that hadn't been there at Columbia. You look well. And you look… He searched for the right word. Extraordinary. Even more so than at your lecture. Beauty is my business now. She took a sip of champagne, though I hear it's yours as well. Your agency represents quite a few successful models, I understand. He preened slightly at the recognition. We do. In fact, my fiancée Tessa is one of our rising stars. How fortunate for her to have such personal management. Nora's voice was honey-sweet, masking the blade beneath. You've always had an eye for beautiful women. Something flickered across his face, a momentary unease. Have we met before the Columbia lecture? You seem to know things about me. This was the moment. The confrontation she had dreamed about for years. She could reveal herself now, watch shock replace his smug confidence, savor the horror that would inevitably follow. As a matter of fact, we have met before, she said, her voice dropping lower. Quite intimately. Confusion clouded his features. You told me I was too ugly to love, she continued, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. You said looking at me every day repulsed you. Daniel went pale, his eyes widening as he stared at her face, searching for traces of the woman he had discarded. Nora, he whispered, disbelief evident in every syllable. She inclined her head slightly. In the flesh. New flesh, admittedly. He took an involuntary step back. My God, You don't look anything like… That was rather the point. She kept her voice conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. You destroyed me, Daniel. You made me believe my worth was tied to my appearance, and then you took that away too. I never meant… He stopped, gathering himself. What happened between us was unfortunate, but it was years ago. People grow apart. Relationships end. Is that what happened? She raised an eyebrow. We grew apart? Because I remember you telling me quite specifically that my face disgusted you, that you were tired of pretending I was worthy of desire. He glanced around nervously, as if worried someone might overhear. Nora, please. That was a difficult time for both of us. Things were said in anger. Not anger, she corrected him. Contempt. There's a difference. What do you want from me? His voice had an edge of desperation now. An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I handled things poorly. I was younger, less mature. You were 32, she interrupted. A fully formed adult who chose to marry me, then decided I wasn't attractive enough to keep. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it sent an unexpected pang through her chest. Why are you doing this? Why now? You're successful, beautiful, by any measure you've won. Why dredge up ancient history? The question caught her off guard. Why was she doing this? What did she hope to gain from this confrontation? For 5 years she had fantasized about this moment, imagined his shock, his regret, his desperate attempts to win her back once he saw what she had become. She had pictured herself cold and triumphant, finally holding all the power. But standing here now, looking at this man who had once been her entire world, she felt none of the vindication she had expected. Instead, she felt pity. Pity for the shallow man who could only value women for their exteriors. Pity for the younger Nora who had believed his love was worth dying for. And pity for the woman she had become, someone who had allowed his rejection to define her for half a decade. You know, she said finally, I've been asking myself the same question. Why am I still letting you haunt my decisions? Why did I spend millions of dollars and endure months of pain to transform myself into someone you would desire? She looked around the opulent room, at the beautiful people in beautiful clothes, all of them caught in the same endless cycle of judgment and validation. I thought becoming the most desired woman in the country would somehow negate what you did to me. That external validation could heal internal wounds. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. And did it? No. The simplicity of her answer seemed to surprise him. It just made me realize how empty that kind of validation really is. How meaningless beauty becomes when it's disconnected from who you actually are. So why confront me now? Closure, maybe. Or maybe just to see if you'd recognize me. She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her perfect features into something more human. You didn't, by the way. Not even a flicker of recognition. I guess my transformation was successful. He had the decency to look ashamed. I'm sorry, Nora. For what it's worth, I was wrong. About everything. She studied him, this man who had once held such power over her. You know what's ironic? In about 10 minutes, Lumiere is going to announce that I'm the new face of their global campaign. My face, the one you couldn't bear to look at, will be on billboards in every major city in the world. I'll be officially recognized as the most desired woman in America. Something that might have been jealousy flashed across his face. Congratulations! But I'm not going to sign the contract, she continued, watching surprise replace his forced smile. Because I finally realized something important. I don't need the world to desire me to know my worth. Before he could respond, Melissa appeared at her side. Nora, the executives are waiting. It's time for the announcement. Nora nodded, then turned back to Daniel one last time. Goodbye, Daniel. I truly hope you find what you're looking for. As she walked away, she felt a weight lifting, a burden she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it wasn't a natural part of her. For the first time in 5 years, she felt free of Daniel's ghost, free of the desperate need to prove him wrong. She made her way to the VIP section where the Lumiere executives waited, their faces alight with excitement for the announcement that would dominate tomorrow's headlines. Nora! Philippe Durand, the CEO, greeted her with European double kisses. The moment has arrived. Are you ready to make history? She smiled at him, at the team of executives and publicists who had been wooing her for months. Actually, Philippe, there's something I need to discuss with you before the announcement. The gossip blogs had a field day. Beauty queen rejects record contract. Nora Chen's shocking decision. Fame's most mysterious model walks away. What's next for the woman who said no to Lumiere? Nora read none of it. After the gala, she had retreated to her penthouse and done something she hadn't allowed herself in years. She had cried. Not from sadness or anger, but from release. The purging of emotions long suppressed in her quest for physical perfection. In the weeks that followed, she declined all interviews and public appearances. Instead, she focused on answering the question that had haunted her since her confrontation with Daniel. Who was Nora Chen when she wasn't defined by either rejection or adoration? The answer began to take shape slowly. She started with small changes, letting her natural hair color grow out, simplifying her makeup routine, wearing clothes that felt comfortable rather than strategic. She reconnected with old passions, literature, art, teaching. 3 months after walking away from Lumiere, Nora founded the Mirror Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people recover from emotional and physical trauma caused by destructive beauty standards. She funded it entirely with the money that would have gone to more surgeries, more enhancements, more attempts to embody an impossible ideal. The work was healing in ways that cosmetic procedures never had been. She shared her story honestly, not just with the program participants, but with the world, through a memoir that became an unexpected bestseller. Reconstructed told the unvarnished truth about her transformation, about the pain behind the beauty, about the emptiness of validation based solely on appearance. Critics called it brutally honest and a necessary corrective to toxic beauty culture. Women wrote to her by the thousands, sharing their own stories of rejection, of self-hatred, of the desperate measures they had taken to be deemed worthy of love. 1 year after walking away from the Lumiere contract, Nora stood before a packed auditorium at a women's conference in Los Angeles. The audience was diverse, women of all ages, shapes, colors, and backgrounds, united by their interest in her message. Beauty is not a weapon, she told them, her voice carrying to the back of the room without a microphone. It's not armor. It's not a ticket to happiness or love or worthiness. It's just a characteristic, like height or eye color or the sound of your laugh. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. I spent 5 years and millions of dollars trying to become the most desired woman in the country because one man told me I was too ugly to love. And you know what I discovered at the end of that journey? The room was silent, hundreds of women leaning forward in their seats. That being desired isn't the same as being valued. That being beautiful isn't the same as being whole. And that no amount of external validation can heal wounds that we refuse to acknowledge. In the back of the room, a door opened quietly. Nora glanced up and saw a familiar figure slip in. Zara, who had stood by her through everything, who had never once told her she was making a mistake, even when it was clear she was. Beside her was a man Nora didn't recognize, tall, with kind eyes and a quiet presence. Zara had mentioned dating someone new, someone who saw beyond her friend's surface to the depth beneath. The real transformation, Nora continued, wasn't what happened to my face or my body. It was what happened when I finally understood that my value was never tied to how I looked. That the opinions of others, even those we love, do not define us. That true beauty isn't something you achieve through surgery or makeup or diets, but something you recognize when you look past the surface to what lies beneath. She touched her face gently, the face that had cost her so much, that had brought her fame and fortune and ultimately wisdom. I am not the most desired woman in the country anymore, she said with a smile, and that's the most liberating thing I could possibly tell you. The applause was deafening. After the talk, as the audience filed out, Zara made her way to the stage, the unknown man following behind. That was incredible, Zara said, embracing her friend. You've come so far. We both have, Nora replied, returning the hug. She glanced at the man beside Zara. Are you going to introduce me? Oh. Yes, this is James. James, this is Nora, the friend I've told you so much about. He extended his hand, his smile warm and genuine. It's an honor to meet you. Your talk was, well, it resonated. I lost my wife to anorexia 3 years ago. What you're doing here matters. Something in his direct gaze, in the way he spoke without artifice, caught Nora off guard. For the first time in years, she felt herself blushing, not the practiced, camera-ready flush she had perfected for photo shoots, but a genuine response to human connection. I'm so sorry about your wife, she said, meaning it. And thank you for being here. It can't have been easy to listen to. The truth rarely is, he replied. But it's necessary. The three of them walked together toward the exit, Zara tactfully moving ahead to give them space to talk. As they stepped outside into the California sunshine, Nora felt something unfamiliar, a lightness, a sense of possibility that had nothing to do with how she looked or how others perceived her. Would you like to get coffee sometime? James asked suddenly, his voice hesitant but his eyes steady. I'd like to hear more about your work, and maybe tell you about mine. Nora looked at him, this stranger who had seen her at her most vulnerable and still wanted to know more. Who looked at her face not with blind desire or calculated assessment, but with simple human interest. I'd like that, she said, and meant it. As they exchanged numbers, Nora thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment, from devastation to transformation to something approaching wisdom. She had set out to become the most desired woman in the country, a beautiful weapon aimed at the man who had broken her heart. Instead, she had become something far more powerful, herself. Not the woman Daniel had rejected, not the beauty icon the world had embraced, but Nora Chen, scarred, healed, and finally, genuinely whole.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.